Judge, we can respond within 3 days. There doesn't need to be a briefing schedule. The law is pretty clear cut on this. This case has been dragging on now. We're already in October. We can have a response in 3 days, and we want a hearing as soon as possible.
All right. Prosecutors are ready to go. The defense going into slowdown because as long as he's in Illinois, he's not quite yet facing those murder charges. Let's bring in Court TV crime and justice reporter Julie Janae, who's been covering the story for us. What stalled everything again today?
Stalled again, Vinny, and today it's because of that writ of habeas corpus that the defense says they want to have hearings on and have a brief schedule on. And it's something that was talked about today. You heard the prosecutor saying they don't need a lot of time. They want to go ahead and respond. They only need a couple of days. But there were a lot of issues that were raised by the defense team for Kyle Rittenhouse. They filed that writ, and those issues that they have that they say are a reason these charges should be thrown out is that there are problems with the extradition paperwork. They say there's a missing signature and that there are some false statements that were included, and that this should support their arguments that he should not be extradited from Illinois into Wisconsin, where he's facing those charges. They also bring up the issue that Illinois should be treated as an asylum state and that they should not be compelled to violate Kyle Rittenhouse's his constitutional rights. The defense attorney, John Pierce, he detailed how public reaction is also something that is impacting why those charges should be dropped. Take a listen.
Your Honor, it's no secret that this is a very unique, extraordinary situation. There's a massive amount of video evidence that shows that there's, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that this is not a legitimate criminal prosecution. It is a political prosecution. There are serious issues with the extradition paperwork that, in fact, bolster the suggestion that this is a political prosecution. These papers were sent directly to the governor without us even getting a chance to look at them in the first instance, without any notice. There is no reason to rush. There is danger to this detainee. There is a presidential candidate in the heat of arguably the most heated election perhaps ever, certainly since 1860, that has inflamed the situation. And we simply ask that this detainee's due process rights be observed so we can challenge this in the proper way and ensure that this is a legitimate criminal prosecution and not something else.
And Julie, you talk about the public reaction being a big part of this. A lot of it has to do with the video from that night where, there's a protest relative to the Jacob Blake shooting. And then you've got Kyle Rittenhouse, who seemingly is surrendering but never taken into custody in Wisconsin.
Right. Looking at just the public reaction, it's one of those rare situations where the public seems to be almost as outraged about what happened after a crime than they are about the alleged actual happening of that crime. We took the top voices who have been speaking on this issue, and we also let our experts weigh in on this issue of implicit bias and whether it exists in this situation.
The image of police tanks rolling past Kyle Rittenhouse after an alleged double fatal shooting is drawing criticism and comparisons from the public.
If Jacob had shot the police 7 times, he couldn't have gone home that night. Come on, sir. We need police, but not above the law. Right? Be fair, be honest.
Reverend Jesse Jackson is one of many claiming a stark double standard in how police perceive a threat, evaluating the arrests of Jacob Blake and Rittenhouse in Kenosha, Wisconsin. The arrests sparking a firestorm of controversy playing out on social media, with hundreds of posts alleging a racially motivated distinction between how suspects are treated.
I don't think there are two justice systems.
U.S. Attorney General William Barr blames the perception of a double standard in policing on the media coverage.
I think the narrative that that the police are on some epidemic of shooting unarmed black men is simply a false narrative, and also the narrative that that's based on race.
Stanford law professor Ron Tyler offers a different analysis when he compares the arrests of Blake and Rittenhouse.
What's startling to me, based on the evidence that we already have, is that within 3 minutes from the beginning of the encounter until the use of lethal force. That's how much time it took for the police to make certain assessments and to then make decisions which have now altered his life forever. We compare that to Mr. Rittenhouse. Police told him to get out of the street and then he went on home. So double standard, I think it's fair for people to be thinking about it in those terms. Hard to imagine that this had been a young African-American man holding an AR-15 with gunshots having just rung out. Hard to imagine he would have actually been left free to go on his way. That's an example of implicit bias, potentially.
Evidence of systematic racism in policing needs to be judged on a case-by-case basis, according to former DEA Senior Special Agent David Katz.
Before you make a case that one person is treated differently, you really have to look at the facts and circumstances. Before reacting, look at the situation. See what was transpiring, see it from the officer's eyes. Was the officer acting in self-defense? Was the officer either protecting himself or an innocent third party? That's the way to analyze these before we jump to the conclusion that it's biased and it's racial and the whole system needs to go.
According to a recent study by the University of Michigan, Rutgers University, and Washington University, police use of force is the 6th leading cause of death for young black men. It also found black men are 2.5 times more likely to be killed by police than white men.
I do think that there appears to be a phenomenon in the country where African Americans feel that they're treated, when they're stopped by police frequently, as suspects before they're treated as citizens. I don't think that necessarily reflects some deep-seated racism in police departments or in most police officers. I think there are stereotypes. I think people operate very frequently according to stereotypes, and I think it takes extra precaution on the part of law enforcement to make sure we don't reduce people to stereotypes.
Whether it's stereotypes or systematic racism, Professor Tyler suggests reforms in policing that must start with approaches to new training.
Officers should participate in implicit bias training. That training should occur during their time in the police academy, before they're ever in the field. I think in addition to implicit bias training, it's about being engaged in the communities where you serve. It's about changing the mentality so there's not a warrior mentality, it's a server mentality.
Vinny, important to point out, the sheriff's office in Kenosha did say that the reason that they did not make that arrest and why they did not perceive Kyle Rittenhouse to be a threat at that point was because they were trying to find the people who were injured and that they were experiencing, quote, tunnel vision during the chaos.
Yeah, and when you watch the end of the video where he's trying to surrender, he goes up to the police vehicle and it's like they send him away because they're ready to go towards where everyone was. So interesting stuff. What's next on the calendar here in this case?
The hearing that the judge set today, the postponed hearing, is going to be on October 30th. So ideally, he's going to hear those arguments from both sides and make a decision on not only the writ of habeas corpus, but whether or not to extradite Kyle Rittenhouse back to Wisconsin to face those charges. Okay. So, I mean, that's a big part of this case because Wisconsin can't do anything until he's actually there. Julie Janae, Court TV crime and justice reporter, on top of it as always. Thank you so much. Do appreciate it.